It's been a long time coming. With the release of 5.5, we finally got the ability to C6 Pyro Traveler. Admittedly, I made this video a few weeks later than I wanted to, largely due to some videos taking longer than I wanted to, like this cursed Chi-Chi video, and real-life responsibilities taking much more time. It's already one patch after we could actually C6 PMC, and I took way too long to make this video. Nonetheless, I managed to get a hold of some time to finally use Pyro MC at their full potential. Of course, triple crowned. Thank you all for the wait. I'm going to go through multiple different Pyro MC comp variations, with the full list on screen. This list is a non-exhaustive set of options I cooked up while thinking about how Pyro MC can be played as a DPS, with each section of the video describing the important stats and playstyle bits. As a result, this video will be more of a guide detailing how you can build your Pyro Traveler to be an on-field damage dealer. There will also be accompanying Abyss footage showing my clear with most of the variations, but in the event you want to see the full unedited clears, there's a link in the description below for an unlisted video with all the clears. Before jumping into the comps, let me go over a few things I found about Pyro MC. First of all, they aren't really a Natlan character. Despite having access to Night Soul state, Pyro MC can't proc Night Soul Burst on their own, something that hinders part of their kit, specifically the A4 passive, and prevents them from making use of the two-piece effect of Scroll on their own. It's like only having a green card, which, to be fair, kinda makes sense given how Traveler got an ancient name. Additionally, if you do have a Natlan character in the party, Pyro MC's inclusion won't decrease the cooldown of Night Soul Burst either. Yep, it's kinda ridiculous. I couldn't find much in the way of animation cancels with regards to Pyro MC's abilities, aside from being able to get out of the skill's locked animation by quickly activating their elemental burst after using the skill. It only saves a couple of frames, not really worth worrying about unless you really want to optimize your gameplay. One cool thing to note about Pyro MC's skill is that it can be extended past the 12-second duration, thanks to an effect of hit lag. Hit lag has the effect of freezing buffs and abilities for a brief period, which doesn't reduce the hidden timer indicating their uptime. This allows Pyro MC's skill to stick around for a lot longer. You may have also seen this effect be used with Xiangling or Yujin's burst. This effect is formally called Hit Lag Extension, and it's pretty cool. This extension can apply to both versions of Pyro MC's skill, giving up to 2 more hits in the tap case, so up to 14, and 1 more in the hold case, so up to 5. Also note that burst uptime is important regardless of the comp, since you get extra Night Soul points after using Pyro MC's burst, but it isn't necessarily required to get the maximum duration of Pyro MC's skill. Now you may be asking, which form of the skill is better, tap or hold? Generally speaking, I found holding is better for a DPS Pyro MC, with exceptions depending on what enemy you're facing. There are a couple of reasons for this, so let's talk about the pros and cons for both forms. The hold version has the highest damage potential out of the two, as each of the hits from the hold version can react on the same target, unlike the tap version. Even without considering which can react more, the hold version is still better. When factoring in hit lag extension, which can give potentially 2 extra tap version hits and 1 extra hold hit, the multiplier difference between the two versions is 239.87% of Pyro MC's attack in favor of the hold variant, assuming you have the skill at level 13. Onto my second point of comparison, the energy generation via the tap skill is significantly more consistent timing-wise than the hold skill is. This is because of the mechanics behind when each version deals damage. You see, the hold skill only triggers when damage is dealt, whereas the tap skill will just deal damage if the enemy is close enough. Because the tap skill has a set timer independent of a player's action, the energy generated from it will come at a more consistent pace, which can't be said of the hold skill version. The way the skill variants are triggered also shows another issue. The hold skill won't trigger on certain shielded enemies. This is because shields taking damage do not count as damage dealt, because you aren't lowering an enemy's HP bar. But the tap skill works normally. As a result, if shielded enemies are involved, one has to be mindful of which mode to use. So in conclusion, most of the time you will be using the hold skill, but against certain enemies where you need to take out their shields, you will have to pivot to the tap version. And that's pretty much all the info on Pyro MC's kit, independent of team comp and playstyle. Please do let me know in the description below if I missed anything. It's always cool to learn more about a character. Even though this video is meant to focus on Pyro MC's DPS qualities, let me quickly mention how Pyro MC works as a support. It's pretty simple to build, honestly. Slap 4-piece scroll with an ER Sands, maybe get a crit rate circlet if you're using Fabslord to curb their energy issues, and that's pretty much it, you're done. You can also play around with some EM main stats if you're using Pyro MC to trigger reactions, but there's not really much to it. Most of the time, people who use Pyro MC in this fashion aren't trying to build them for damage. Speaking of damage, there are quite a few artifact sets that suit Pyro MC for a DPS build, which include 4-piece Codex, 4-piece Crimson Witch, 4-piece Gilded in certain setups, and even 4-piece Scroll can be good if you don't already have an existing Scroll character within your team. Generally, the main stats you want to aim for are the following: attack/EM for the Sands, pyro damage bonus for the Cup, and crit damage/crit rate for the Circlet. Of course, if you're using a set like Codex that gives a bunch of crit rate, then crit damage is preferred. For substat priority, ER until you get full burst uptime, crit rate, crit damage, and then attack, which I prefer more than EM. I put attack over EM generally since Pyro MC only really wants EM in specific contexts, being Melt and Vape. In those specific contexts, EM is more important than attack since you'll likely be running Bennett in your PMC team, so you don't need more attack because Bennett already gives a crap ton. For the weapon, Uraku and Mistsplitter are honestly pretty close in power level, and it's fairly comp dependent as to which one actually wins out. If you don't have these two as options, Finale of the Deep and Harbinger of Dawn are good substitutes. I personally put my Pyro MC on a 4-piece Codex build with Mistsplitter for all the following team comps that you'll see in this video. I know in some cases, Uraku wins out. I just wanted to move the fewest things around as possible, as there are quite a few units I use in this video. Why are there still no artifact loadouts or weapon loadouts, please? For the first archetype I'm exploring in this video, we have Overload. I personally think that this is the easiest to play for Pyro MC and does a significant amount of damage despite not having to do any amplifying reactions. The team setup is also fairly flexible. Of course, Chevreuse is effectively a required unit, with her ability to shred 40% resistance to both Pyro and Electro damage with only said characters in the party. She's critical to have for damage purposes. Plus, if you have access to C6, she also gives a ton of damage bonuses. As for the other two slots, most Electro and Pyro units will work, with it being required to have at least one Electro character so Overload can be triggered. Fischl, Auroron, Raiden, and other Electro options are all suitable. Outside of Electro characters, I also recommend using Bennett. With Pyro MC being an attack scaler, a suitable attack buffer is necessary, with Bennett being the best one in this scenario. Eon-san can also work, but there isn't much movement with this team, making her buff less suitable than Bennett's in this particular case. My final team setup includes Pyro MC, Chevreuse, Fischl, and Bennett. I think Auroron would have been better to highlight Pyro MC using Scroll, but I don't have Auroron built yet. Discussing the artifacts of my other three members, Chevreuse is pretty flexible with artifacts in general. 4-piece Noblesse, 4-piece SOTP, 4-piece Instructors, and 4-piece Exile are all great options. I ended up selecting 4-piece SOTP to gain some extra flat damage since I was putting on 4-piece Noblesse for Bennett. As for the weapon, Favlance was my best option overall. One can never escape the curse of Fav. Speaking of Bennett, I placed Fabslord on him, as well as 4-piece Noblesse to, well, meet some energy requirements for the rest of the team and give some extra attack. And finally, Fischl was just geared out as a sub DPS with 4-piece Troop and a Skyward Harp. For the rotation, I start off with Fischl's E, into Chevreuse Q, hold E, into Bennett's E, and then Q. Finally getting into Pyro MC and using their hold skill into Burst, afterward spamming N1C. Ideally using Fischl's Burst before Bennett's Burst expires. Fischl's skill and burst usage is alternated every rotation. There is a slight mistake with this rotation, and that's because I'm using Mistsplitter. I'm losing some damage by not using one normal attack before using the rest of my abilities. And, well, the biggest reason for this is largely my forgetfulness of Mistsplitter's normal attack stack. The second biggest reason is that Pyro MC's Hold E animation leaves you vulnerable for so long that I rather reliably get off the skill and burst without getting absolutely eviscerated by whatever enemy I'm facing. It is what it is. So, let me show you how well the comp performs.
焰！烈武力该走攻击了！日夜换线，不许动！束手就擒，有大家在身边，伤口就不会痛。不是耀眼，现身吧！回应我吧！
一如小姐所愿，
烈武力，最后该走攻击了！收起来吧，束缚，起名吧！以断罪，绳之以法，放下武器，我来保护大家。主攻！顶之压，最后冲敌，束手就擒。有大家在身边。现身吧！起名吧！以断罪，最后冲敌，束手就擒。有大家在身边，伤口就不会痛。束缚，不是耀焰。
一如小姐所愿，
放下武器，必要武力。我来保护大家。好，出发。
As you can see, the comp does pretty well. Do note that since the enemies in this particular Abyss have permanent Hydro Aura, the clears are significantly easier in comparison to other Abyss cycles. Still though, the team has more than sufficient damage to clear the Abyss handily, as shown against the Pillar Automaton. Moving on to our next archetype, Mono-Pyro is also a simple way to play Pyro MC. A typical team comp will have Pyro MC with Shuttling and Bennett to really stack the Pyro damage, and then a Red Shred of choice, with Kazuha and Shallonen being the best available options currently. Any Animo character can fulfill the last slot, but their effectiveness will be markedly less than Shallonen or Kazuha. I end up using both versions in the clear I did, so you can see how they end up both playing out. Builds are fairly standard here. Just note that Scroll on Pyro MC doesn't necessarily make sense here because, well, Pyro MC can't react with anything unless the enemy has a permanent elemental aura. Kazuha and Shallonen already have best in slot sets in the form of 4-piece VV and Scroll respectively, and I put the same weapon on both of them, being Fab Sword. Shuttling is on Fab Lance with 4-piece Emblem for some off-field damage, and Bennett is on the same build as Overload with 4-piece Noblesse and Fab Sword. Rotation's pretty simple. You start off with Bennett EQ, Kazuha EQ, or Shallonen E N2, then Shuttling EQ, and then Pyro MC N1, EQ, N1 C spam. Again, I did forget at times to do the first normal attack to proc Mist Splitter. It is what it is. Anyways, Abyss, round 2.
来吧！说吧，喷火！嘿呀！该走攻击了！曙光，不是耀焰！
可叹落叶。
热乎嘛！
踏风。
好，出发，我来保护大家。讲不通就打扁了。
起！
曙光！烧起来吧！有大家在身边。
踏风。云野，夜明。
说吧，喷火！见识下师傅的枪法。
起！
我来保护大家。
风棍离形。
起灵吧！热乎嘛！烧起来吧！嘿哈！该走攻击了。
Overall, it's a pretty simple comp to play, especially considering the skill order is basically the same for all 4 units. The next comp won't be nearly as easy to play. With Mono-Pyro out of the way, we can finally start talking about amplifying reactions. Let's go over Melt first. To be honest, this is probably the hardest PMC DPS variant to get working properly, as Pyro can easily overtake Cryo as the primary aura. You might notice by the section name that I'm not talking about Melt Plunge. This is because you won't be melting Pyro MC's damage in this setup most of the time, you'd be melting your Cryo damage, since one Cryo character is insufficient to handle the total amount of Pyro application Pyro MC can output unless you forego using your skill at minimum. And before you say, oh, just drop Bennett in the 4th slot, then Pyro MC really doesn't do as much damage, and it's not really worth running this kind of team. For my testing, the only real way to get any sort of semi-consistent melts off is to have 2 Cryo characters in the party. Hence why my choice was this team: Pyro MC, Sitlolly, Rosaria, and Bennett. In terms of replacements, I honestly wanted to use Diona originally in this team, but Diona's application is far too low to reliably melt all of PMC's damage. Sitlolly plus Diona is insufficient to keep a Cryo Aura, and the same can be said of Rosaria and Diona. Aya can be easily swapped in over either of the current Cryo units, but that's about it in terms of substitutes. Quickly going over builds, we have 4-piece Scroll and Sack Frags on Sitlolly, 4-piece Emblem and Fab Lance on Rosaria, and 4-piece Noblesse and Fab Sword on Bennett. I would have rather used 4-piece Instructors on Bennett here since EM is an extremely relevant stat for this comp, but I had a hard time getting a set with enough crit to reliably proc Fab Sword. As for the rotation itself, one of the biggest issues Pyro MC has with regards to Melt is that they have a lot of Pyro application. Even with 2 Cryo characters, I found that trying to melt PMC's skill, ult, and normal and charge attacks at the same time to be an impossible task. So I didn't try to melt all of them at the same time, instead focusing on melting specifically the ult and normal charge attacks and formulating a very specific rotation to facilitate that. So in my rotation, I start off with Pyro MC hold E, into Sitlolly, E, Q, and E again, and then into Bennett, E, Q, and Rosaria, E, Q, finally into Pyro MC, where I use ult first, use N2C, and then N1C spam. You ideally want to N2C with Pyro MC first so that the melt lines up with the part of the charge attack that has the higher multiplier, but I do mess this up quite a bit, partially because not going straight to N1C spam is a bit foreign to me. I also mess this rotation up a lot because the application timing is a bit tricky, but doing this pattern can ensure all of Pyro MC's normal and charge attacks and burst can melt, while also allowing for Cryo characters to get melts as well, like Sitlolly and Rosaria in this party. I do normal attack once in the Abyss footage I'm about to show before using Pyro MC burst, but that ends up ruining melt a lot of the time, which is why I recommend the rotation I just presented instead. Anyways, here are the Abyss runs.
闪装，可交给你们俩了。该走攻击了。 了，收起来吧，别想跑！制裁！不必留情。斯特拉林一字爬爬给我上！有大家在身边，站立吧！曙光！可交给你们俩了。我来保护大家，别想跑！晚安了。你新盟约吧，新魔们！斯特拉林一字爬爬给我上！有大家在身边，伤口就不会制裁。审判！该走攻击了，不必留情，也可交给你们俩了。履行盟约吧，制裁！我来保护大家，出来干活，让我见识见识恶药伤人！站立吧！履行盟约吧，新魔们！该走攻击了！服饰耀焰！别想跑！不必留情。晚安了，收起来吧，我来保护大家。履行盟约吧，新魔们！斯特拉林一字爬爬给我上！不必留情，可交给你们俩了。该走攻击了，出来干活！制裁！起名吧！主光！斯特拉林一字爬爬给我上！不必留情，有大家在身边，伤口就不会站立吧！让我见识见识恶药伤人！履行盟约吧，该走攻击了。审判！晚安了。曙光！斯特拉林一字爬爬给我上！收起来吧，有大家在身边。站立吧！服饰耀焰！
I missed so many melts, it's unreal. I did say that this was the hardest variant to play for a reason. One slightly mistimed pyro attack will result in the entire rotation being ruined. As a result, it's hard to play and master. I'll probably revisit this comp later. There might be some new / old characters in the future that can help with the overall cryo application situation. Following melt, we have Vape, the other amplifying reaction in the game. For Vaporize, there are only a few characters who have enough amplification on their own to be able to vaporize most of Pyro MC's damage without having the Hydro Aura overridden, Xingqiu being among them. As for the other two team slots, I chose Bennett and Shallonen. Shallonen would be able to provide relevant damage bonuses and Res Shred, while Bennett plays the same role as basically every other comp I've used in this video so far. If you're wondering why I'm not just using Farina instead of Xingqiu, because, you know, Farina has all these damage bonuses which would increase Pyro MC's damage, her application is insufficient to fully vape both Pyro MC's skill, normal charge attacks, and burst consistently. You can maybe get away with it at times, but it isn't as consistent as using Shincho. Speaking of substitutes, there's not really much in the way of them here, other than using, say, a different resistance shred such as Kazuha, Sucrose, or any other Animo user over Shilonen. If you're wondering whether or not you can use Yelan over Shincho here, C0 Yelan cannot provide enough Hydro application to outdo Shincho at C6. But if your Yelan is C2 or above, she will have enough Hydro application such that Pyro MC can vaporize all their attacks. Now, of course, you could potentially go with a double Hydro setup as well, but you would either have to drop Res Shred or the attack boost from Bennett, and I don't like dropping either Res Shred or attack buffs. It's just too valuable for Pyro MC. So yeah, that's the entire team roundout. As for Vape Plunge, the classic setup for this is, you know, Pyro MC, Farina, Shenyun, Bennett. Pretty standard stuff. Now, this technically is Pyro MC's highest damage per second team. I don't like it for a couple of reasons. The primary one is that you can effectively replace Pyro MC in this team with any character in the game and still easily clear Abyss. These three as a supportive core just makes the remaining slot irrelevant. So I won't be showing a run of this particular comp because of my dislike of it, and also because my Shenyun is level 1. Going back to the Vaporize comp I've chosen, some of the builds are fairly obvious given what I've shown already. Shilonen on 4-piece Scroll and Fab Sword, Shincho on Sack Sword and 4-piece Emblem, and Bennett on 4-piece Noblesse and Fab Sword. Again, I would have liked to put instructors, but I don't have instructor set with enough crit to reliably proc Fab Sword, so yeah. As for the rotation, I want to start with Shincho's E, then Q, then E if I get the sack proc, into Bennett, Q, E, into Shilonen, E, and 1, Q, and 1 to get damage bonuses for both Hydro and Pyro. Following this up with Pyro MC's Hold E, Q, and N2C, and then N1C spam. Aside of me rarely using N2C as a mistake, I should be using N2C more because then I get the better vape alignment on the charge attack. This is also the first time I've actively tried to double crystallize with Shilonen, so there are some difficulties getting both damage bonuses since Shincho can just apply Hydro by simply standing next to an enemy for too long. I also do Shilonen E and 2 Q for most of my runs instead of E and 1 Q and 1, which messes up some damage bonus stuff. I'm a bit too quick on the trigger finger, it happens. Anyway, time for the last comp. Hope you enjoy the Abyss runs.
来吧，我来保护大家。财雨流淌。起名吧！雨线难画。起名吧！财雨流红。断。有大家在身边，伤口就不会。非常棒，山之血。不是耀焰。支持成景，财断。该走攻击了。来吧，回答吧，恶之声。固化生命，财有大家在身边，伤口就不会。非常棒，山之血。起名吧！雨线难画。该走攻击了，烧起来吧！回答吧，恶之声。复活。
And here are all the builds I used, separated by the archetype of comp used. Hope you all enjoy what is basically the closest I'm ever going to make to a guide video. Pyro MC is a fairly fun DPS, and as I hope this video shows, there's a good amount of potential comps to fit them in and use. Now, some of you may be asking, what about Burgeon? Burgeon as a concept isn't bad, but if you were to actually get this comp to work in a scenario where you're actually 36-starring Abyss, Pyro MC is likely not doing the most damage in the team, and it's going to be someone like Arena or Shinsho perhaps instead, because Burgeon damage overall isn't necessarily contributing that much. Also, since Pyro MC is doing less damage than other members of the party, it didn't really make sense to fit in a Burgeon team in this video, because I'm trying to highlight Pyro MC's qualities as a DPS, not as a sub-DPS support. At any rate, I've finally gone through all the available travelers. I'll likely make another travel video at some point before Cryo MC, but it'll be a bit. Maybe something on mastering Pyro MC melt comps. If there are any inaccuracies with this video, please do let me know in the comments section down below so that I can make a pinned comment with a note on it. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.